everybody. Welcome to the Hallmarkies podcast. We are very excited today. We have a returning guest interview today with Antonio Cayonne is here, and I'm from Rachel Wagner. Antonio, thank you so much for coming back.
Thank you for having me on again.
Yes.
I'm excited
So
to be back.
last time we talked with you was in December of last year.
Yeah.
So we haven't talked to you in 2021. So you've had quite the last 6 months.
I really have. I kind of, I always keep myself very busy, but this is a different level of busy.
Yeah.
Wife and I and our 3-year-old welcomed a new member to the family.
Yay.
We just had our second child, a little boy named Kari. And so he's been around just over 2 months now outside of her body. And so things are changing. But certainly, like, as of January, we were kind of in a preparatory mode, trying to get ourselves ready for it and trying to manage our littlest and moving houses because we're gluttons for punishment. And so 2021 has been pretty full on. And of course, amidst all that, we're still like everyone else, and Canada's behind in terms of the vaccination in regard to the States, but still managing the pandemic. And so managing, what my restaurants are doing. And it's been pretty full on.
Oh my gosh. Have you gotten any sleep?
Yeah. Well, funny enough, I just completed a film that shot out of town, actually, which was a crazy decision to make to go out of town a little bit and sort of to figure out what support looked like here at home while I was away. But in shooting out of town, I slept 8 hours every day.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I was waking up like discombobulated. I couldn't make heads or tails of that type of rest. So
your wife was probably so jealous.
I know, she was sleeping 2 hours a day. Now I have to figure out how to invert that. Get as much sleep as possible. And I'll just stay up for the rest of the year.
Yeah. So how did you decide on Kari is the name?
It was a name that my wife and I had come across only once in our lives, and it was just a beautiful name. I mean, kind of, we allow ourselves with our first child and with this child to just kind of intuitively like feel our way through what felt right and sounded right when we said it. And my wife always jokes that she needs a name that she can shout across a playground and feel comfortable. So I guess it passed that test.
Yeah. But, it's a good name because it's like unique without being ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. Like like I said, I only know one person by the name Kari, and he's a brilliant musician. And I know that the name is not unique around the world. Like, there are places where that name is a little bit more common.
Yeah.
But certainly not in my circles. And just like it resonated with us. Like, upon saying it a couple times, it really landed and made sense to us. And so,
that's great.
Yeah.
So how's your son taken to having a brother?
He's of two minds about it. On one hand, he loves having a brother, and on the other hand, he's ready to put him in the garbage most days. So I think that is pretty normal.
Yeah.
One of the things that I observed with Xavier's the older one, one of the things I observed is that he really, for the first little while, and it's starting to even out now, but for the first little while, he had this separation between the idea of a brother and the reality of a brother. And so the idea was really romantic. And when he would talk about the idea, it would be when the baby is older, or maybe the baby would like it, and da-da-da-da, but he would never use Kari's name. And then when he would speak about his brother tangibly, he would use his name, but it was rarely in positive terms. It wasn't always negative, but it wasn't positive. And so that's one of the things that I noticed right away, was that there was actually a separation between these two ideas that eventually that they had to come together, that gap needed to be bridged. Just now kind of rounding that corner, which allows him to be more in touch with his feelings. So when he's having negative feelings, he's actually upset at mom. He's actually upset at dad. It's like the baby isn't doing anything to him, although the baby is, perhaps eating up attention and eating up space.
Mhm.
But it feels now like he is able to piece that together a little bit better. Uh,
Yeah. It
we can see
it
his behavior changing.
it always amazes me how early on little, kids notice how, a baby that's smaller than them, right?
Yeah,
There's,
yeah,
it could be, like, a year old and the newborn, and they'd be like, "That's a baby," and
yeah.
"No, you're a baby still."
I know, but it really does. I think you're spot on. Like something shifts in their way of thinking, even when the baby is not their own. Like they're at the playground.
Yeah,
Mother
right,
would do this all the time. He'd be at the playground and he would say "baby" and point to someone smaller than him. And I think that part of it was a way of helping even to better identify himself.
right.
He had a reference point for the first time.
Mhm.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah, like I spend a lot of time with my older trying to convince him that his lot in life is to teach. um, and part of that is just that what I think will happen and what I'm seeing happening is that he takes a little bit more care with certain things.
Mhm.
He's less cavalier with information that he has. The things that he knows now mean something.
Yeah.
Look at Kari and say, well, you don't know this, in the same way that he could say you're smaller than me and therefore you're a baby. It's like,
Mhm.
I know how to talk. I know how to talk.
Yeah.
I can help you with that one day.
Did you grow up with siblings?
I did. Yeah, I'm the
Yeah.
youngest. So I have two older
Oh,
sisters.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. So you know that dynamic.
yeah, kind of. I
Yeah.
mean,
Mhm.
certainly, like in a household, having siblings makes more sense to me than having an only child.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's great.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you.
That's
It's
really
it's
exciting.
hard, but it's exciting.
So you also had a new restaurant baby at
Sort
the
of.
same
Yeah,
time.
we're about to. In fact, we're not
Yeah.
opening until mid-July. But
Okay.
yeah, and that was all sorts of different circumstances. But it is built and it is pretty much ready to go. And once when you and I are done here, I'm gonna hop over there and sit down with my team because I haven't gotten to see anybody in like a month.
Well, this is so exciting. Collective Goods, is that right?
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
we're opening up like a part bistro, part grocer.
Mm.
We know the bistro side of things. We do not
Mhm.
the grocer side of things, but I'm confident that we can figure it out.
Mhm.
I think it'll be a
Yeah.
pretty cool concept
Yeah, that
for the
sounds
city.
good.
Yeah.
There's a place kind of like that here in Salt Lake called Caputo's, and they've been amazing during this whole pandemic, and they make the best sandwiches that you've ever
Oh
had.
yeah.
Yeah. And they've been doing these artisanal support packs where uh you can get all these artisanal farmers. They have cheese and meats and
Oh, that's
chocolates
beautiful.
and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
That they've been
we're
doing.
definitely not far off from that actually.
Yeah.
And ours was also born out of the pandemic. Like,
Mhm.
we discovered the business model while we were doing good for the community, and on the back end, we were like, man,
Mhm.
we get a building and put this in there.
That's great. So how many restaurants do you have now?
By the end of this year, our group, and our group is like four of us, um,
Uh-huh.
we'll have three total. And within one of them, there's also a sandwich shop. So we kind of talk about it like four, but it's only three buildings.
Mhm. That's
Yeah,
great. There's
it's wild.
nothing I love more than a great sandwich. I mean, that is like
Yeah,
peak eating.
our sandwich spot is pretty pretty killer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. And have you been able to, I guess, keep everything going then as far as the restaurants with with the pandemic? And I mean, last time we
Yeah.
talked to you, you were working a lot with community and everything like
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, for the most part, we've been able to keep going in some way or another. Yeah, during the pandemic, we shifted into the staff meal initiative that we launched, and that was really great
Mhm.
for the community. And on the back end of that, when the government gave us the green light to safely reopen, we kept that going and opened our sandwich shop, and then tried to get both restaurants back up and running. Uh,
Mhm.
that's just been kind of tumultuous, only because things kind of keep getting ground to a halt by the government, which is fine. They're
Yeah.
figuring it out as much as anybody else. I'm slightly sympathetic towards it. I just wish that they were better communicators, because my God, for people who do that for a living, they should really be better at communicating information to individuals and businesses. But that's
Yeah.
grievance for another day. But we've been very lucky to be able to pivot and move things outdoors when we had to, and move things online when we had to. And we're just now at a point in BC where restrictions have been lifted and restaurants are able. And so both of our existing restaurants are back up and running. Um, so yeah, it's been up and down, and it's
Mhm.
without its difficulties, layoffs and whatnot. But through it all, we've been able to, I think, in many ways, get clearer with each other and develop stronger relationships with the people who are considered staff, but
Mhm.
are really like friends and families. And make sure that we're all sort of like communicating and taking care of each other as best as we can, so that we can come through this on the other side. Like we're the type of group that sat everybody down to say, we're being forced into a layoff right now that we didn't see coming, because the government just announced this literally overnight. But don't like don't suffer. If
Mhm.
you are in trouble, pick up the phone, call me,
Yeah.
send a text message. Like, we'll figure it out, because we know that on the other end of this, things are coming back. And so, like, we just encourage everybody who works with us to try and be as honest with themselves and with each other as possible, so they can say, like, "Hey, I'm in need," and then somehow
Yeah.
itself. We'll
Yeah.
come up with a solution, or we'll brainstorm it together. There's always some solution.
Mhm. That's
So,
great. I
yeah,
that's
it's a
that I
wild
admire that.
opportunity. Yeah, and like, I have to say, as hard as this has all been, that level of honesty with each other and transparency with each other may not have happened had we not have been put in this situation.
Mhm.
This is how our hearts function, but with
Yeah.
opportunity, we may never have had to say it. So there is something really powerful, I think, about being in this tough situation and being able to look over at your peers and say, like, how do we take care of each other properly?
Yeah, it's been, great to see that in a lot of different areas. I have some friends that are cast members, at Disneyland, and they've created they created the cast member pantry, to provide food for, laid off, cast members, and they've all kind of rallied together in a
Right.
way that's, when they did reopen finally, it was very moving to watch, and I can only imagine to participate in, and that's just one example of so many, that you've seen that at Broadway, where they're
Yep. Yeah.
supporting each other, and that, it is really inspirational to see.
It really is. It's
Yeah.
great.
We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast.
From the author of Miracles and Menorahs comes a story about history, responsibility for it, and how true love can change the future.
History of Us is the second book in Stacey Agdern's Friendship and Festivals series.
Available on June 24th from Thule Publishing and wherever books are sold.
For more information about Stacey, visit her website at www.staceyagdern.com.
That's staceyagdern.com.
I wanted to have you on here in June because, we had our big, Black Lives Matter kind of interview that we did last year in
Mhm.
June. And so
Yeah.
I thought it would be a good idea to kind of touch base and see kind of how we're doing, and, I don't know, just have sort of a year
Yeah.
retrospective kind of a look, and so we did. It was very exciting. That interview won for the Homeworkers Podcast Awards
Right.
as the
That was
favorite
wild.
interview.
That was
Yeah,
very cool. That
I
was
was
very
excited.
cool.
Yeah, because it was a bit of a risk,
Hmm.
because it was a little more serious, I
Yeah.
guess, than we're typically kind of light and fun,
Yeah.
so it was a little bit of a risk, but I thought it was really good, and so I
Yeah. And
was
I think
very
it says
glad to.
something. It really says something that it was voted on. Like, I think everybody
Mhm.
wanted um, to have that conversation, and probably even further than that, people were having that conversation in different ways in their lives, and they might have had access to people that they could speak to about it, or they didn't have access to people that they felt like they could speak to about it. And so us being able to speak, may have given license to larger conversations or clarity for curiosities that people were having. I mean, I know that I valued it, and it was for me one of many, many, many conversations that I had been and continue to have on the topic.
Yeah.
So
So,
yeah, it was very valuable.
So how do you feel we have done in the last year, just collectively, I guess, and then also Hallmark in specific, as far as, do you feel like we've seen an improvement? How do you kind of feel that we're doing in representation and all of these issues?
Yeah, well, I'll say it's a tough question to answer in a vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
I think what we ended up seeing this past year is things got much worse before they got any better. In terms of violence against different groups, we saw the rise against Asian Americans. We saw, just the other day here in London, Ontario, a Muslim family was run over late at night because they were Muslim. And
Oh my gosh.
that was the only reason. It's a hate crime. We saw, not to drag us down this deep dark thing, but a part of me wants to say, well, there's been a ton of positive, and there certainly has. When I get going, I don't ever mean to exclude some of the positive things that have happened, like the trial for Derek Chauvin. I think was pretty important in some ways. I also think it
Mm-hmm.
was kind of irrelevant in other ways, unfortunately, because I think that something like that further perpetuates the idea that this may not be a systemic problem and that it may be an individualistic problem, which is simply not true.
Mm-hmm.
And it's proven, this idea of me saying it's simply not true is proven by zooming out and looking what the rest of the year was. So in terms of how we're doing as a people, I think what I would really land on is the conversations that are happening,
Mm-hmm.
the amount of people who don't um, who don't or didn't see themselves as immediately affected by it,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's because of their race, their culture, their religious beliefs, or whatever, that is shifting. The conversations are
Mm-hmm.
starting to become personalized. And I do think that that is extremely positive because it means that people who didn't have to think about it are starting to think about it. And furthermore,
Mm-hmm.
I think that, and this is a tiny, tiny, tiny thing. I don't think that this is widespread, but seeds have to look like something.
Sure.
People are starting to feel with instead of feel for, and for me, that's a huge distinction.
Mm.
Typically, in the past, we say like, "My God, my heart is with that community," and it's a really empty statement, unfortunately, because it separates you from them, which is a problem because we are one. We have to believe that we are one
Mm-hmm.
for things to change. And so when I say that people are starting to feel with instead of feeling for, I think what is starting to happen is people are hearing this conversation. They're hearing the traumas that people are living through, the fear that people are living with, and they're starting to relate it to pieces of their own lives. And now people are starting to speak up because something needs to be said, not because they have a friend that looks like that, or not because
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to be an ally, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I believe that we're starting, and like I said, this isn't like 90% of people. This is maybe a smaller percentage, but people are waking up to the concept that shifting wealth and power as an anti-racist statement and creating space for new sort of like paradigms, new ways of thinking, really comes from tapping into your own sense of humanity and speaking up because it isn't right. Not because it isn't
Mm-hmm.
right for Black people or for transgender or for Asian Americans. It's not right, period. And I think
Right.
that shift from feeling for to feeling with, again, really only started being spoken about loudly um, during the uprising on the back end of George Floyd's murder.
Mm.
And now we're seeing all of these different violent things happening, and one by one people are turning and going, no, that just is unequivocally not okay. I need to say something. And I think
Mm.
that's there's power in that. So I know that's
Yeah.
a roundabout a roundabout answer, but
Mhm.
I don't think I have a square answer for how we're doing. I think that there are a lot of positives, and
Mhm.
when I talk about when I talk about tending to your garden, that's the type of work that I think people need to be doing. And some people are doing that work, and other people are starting to at least wake up and see that they need some pesticide in their garden. They need to get that work done.
Yeah, I feel like you have those people that are never gonna change, that,
Yeah, maybe.
that you have those, and then you have the people who were already allies, and then
Hmm.
it's that middle group
Yes.
that has been changing the most.
Yeah, and this is where I'm the most interested. And I say this all the time. I'm like, look, if we as a people can start to invest in our own humanity, what it means to look out at the world around me and say, I want to take care because taking care is the right thing to do,
Mhm.
we'll eventually build our own sort of civilization of kindness. And those people who are ignorant or hatred or hateful, or
Mhm.
fearful or whatever it is, will make the choice to come join us and stand together in love, or
Mhm.
end on their island of unhappiness. And what I don't want is people to feel like they have to be on that island. The irony right now is that it's the transgendered community right now that's standing on that island. Well,
Mhm.
they shouldn't be. There's no reason to. But there's a fear to come to, let's call it the mainland, because the mainland is full of hate. And
Mhm.
I think that as that middle ground that you speak of starts to challenge their inherited values and challenge the ways in which they've been educated, and they start to decolonize and sort of shed like a settler colonialist mentality, that's going to shift. And if there are people who are never going to change, that's okay. There is still space for them in this world. I'm never gonna turn the corner and be like, well, screw them. They don't deserve to be here. They also deserve to be here, but how much space do they get to take up? They don't get to take it
Mhm.
away from people, and that's what's been happening for
Mhm.
forever.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Hallmark. So we have obviously the new CEO,
Yeah.
Wanya, and things have been changing, it seems like weekly. And we
Yeah.
hear about people leaving,
Whoops.
things changing, and it's going to be interesting to see kind of what happens in this next Christmas season, as far as casting and
Mhm.
topics and other things. I think that, I mean, we did see in the 2020 season some diversity in casting for Christmas.
Yep.
I mean, it was obviously they had to kind of work. It was a tough situation. They had to work with what they could work with as far as the pandemic and everything. And it's
Yeah.
incredible that they got so many movies made. I still can't
It's
believe that.
wild. Yeah.
It was unbelievable. And but it this year so far for Hallmark has been pretty white.
Yeah.
It has not been as diverse as I was expecting.
Yeah.
But they have had some moments like the on Good Witch, they have a same-sex relationship story
Right.
for Joy, the character, and it's also an actress of color, that's the partner for her, and so that's exciting. That's definitely something they've never done on any of their shows before. They also had Viv Leacock and his
Yeah.
family
And one
on
calls the
One
heart.
Calls the Heart,
Yeah.
so that was good, and that was one of the highlights of the season, I would say, of When Calls the Heart was him and his 2 children,
Yeah. They're going to introduce a
playing.
little bit of diversity into Chesapeake this year.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah. I have pretty mixed reviews, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I think we spoke about this a little bit last time, with the hiring of Wanya Lucas.
Mhm.
Phrase that I use frequently, and that I would repeat again, is like not to mistake a black face for a black agenda. Um,
Mhm.
and I use the term black in reference to myself in my own life, but you could replace that word with any sort of any marginalized group, right? Like
Right.
you need to make the change. Don't just need to look like the people that need the change. They actually need to be advocating on behalf of it. I don't, and I bring that up to say I don't know what her point of view is. I haven't read or heard anything, and all I have gotten to see is this kind of like 8-month snippet of changes. And I feel kind of the same way I think that you do, which is there was a lot of casting that happened in September, October, November, December. And I reserve my judgment to know whether that was knee jerk or whether that was true change. And then January to now, there's been a bit of an emptiness.
Yeah.
Or a bit of a reverting back to. And again, I don't know if that was things were already planned and they have to fulfill contracts, although I don't think it was that, or if it was the pushback isn't there, so the reaction's not there. And so I have the same questions today that I did a year ago, in spite of what optically looks like progress. Because to me, progress is a timeline. And if we're going backwards on the timeline, then it is no longer progress. Right? It was just a monetized stop on the way somewhere else. And I hope that it's not that in the long term, in the grand scope of things. I also think that change has to happen at many levels, and casting, and I said this when we talked about this the first time, and like I'll say it again, casting is the easiest place to make a change that gains you viewership or that gains you goodwill, because that's who shows up on camera. But I also have a big question around what are you doing to bring writers into the room that are representative of the world that you're speaking to, that you're talking about. Did you bring in Black writers? Did you bring in Asian writers? Did you bring in writers that represent the LGBTQ community? Did you do that with producers? Like, what does that mentorship look like?
Yeah, and I think
The
that
quick answer is not yet.
yeah, I think that Lifetime did a better job with that this last holiday season with, they had, they had the Christmas setup, with which was their first LGBTQ, romance, and, that was all done by that community, was all part of creating it, and I think that's part of the reason why it was so good. They had a married couple, in the leads, and that was really sweet, and then, I mean, Fran Drescher is such a icon, in of that community as well, and such an advocate, so I think that they did I would say a better job of, of
Yeah.
that over
And
there.
I didn't tune into a lot of the Lifetime stuff. A lot of what I learned, honestly, is from Twitter and following you and Anne and Dory and sort of keeping up with those conversations. And I do watch some of the stuff around Christmas because I have a lot of friends that are in it, and I'm a sucker for watching my friends excel.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I look at it, I want to believe I'm in the world. I want to believe that we're heading in a positive direction and that there's more space being made. And I truly, here's the thing, deep down, I think that the intention, especially after this past year, is there. And I think that the strategy is still being developed. How these things, right? How to get something more authentic. And I don't know who's having those conversations or what it sounds like in the room. I'm definitely not in those rooms in Hallmark. And so what I can say is, I with with the most generous spirit that I have, I believe that they're headed there. I don't know that they're there.
Yeah.
I would never give credit for being there if they're not, but I'm also not going to hold them to the fire and say you're not trying, because I actually do think that I think there's a separation between trying and achieving, and I do think that someone is trying.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, you had something like A Sugar and Spice Holiday
Exactly.
on Lifetime, which was a all Asian cast
Yeah, we have
and an
Jackie
Asian
and
director
yeah,
and
it's amazing.
writer.
Yeah.
And that was
Which is that's what you need. That's what you need. You know, like if we follow what's happening right now, you have Simu Liu talking about Kim's Convenience and
yeah.
back from like John Doyle and whatever, uh, and I go like, Simu's making a great point. It's a very simple point, but it's a great point.
Hmm.
A whole bunch of Korean Canadian faces who have lived these lives. These are some of like even before Simu was like a breakout star. Forget him. Like like the gentleman who plays the dad and the woman who plays the mom are like Canadian royalty in the theater scene.
Yeah.
They have incredible lives and richness of information. And then you have a writer's room that doesn't represent them and tells them what their story is. There's a
Yeah. Which made me really sad because I love that show so much.
Yeah, it's a
But
great show, and the
it's an
people on the show are
important.
fantastic. Like, you know, I'm obviously biased because I'm from Toronto, and they're all Toronto
Yeah.
cats. But like, it is important to be able to look at it and to own it. And you know what
Yeah.
I think is a real bummer is both Jin Yoon and Simu have spoken up, and nobody has said, "Yeah, the thing you're saying is really important and valid. Your experience is valid." Instead, they're saying,
Hmm.
"What do you know? What do you know? What do you know?" Which is
Yeah.
right? Like it's indicative of this larger problem that we're talking about.
Hmm.
Nobody is
Yeah.
willing nobody's willing to look at themselves as as having been influenced by a structured system and say, "Holy smokes, I'm doing a thing to you that's putting you in a bad situation."
Because even I admit it that when I first heard, like, I felt, because I'm such a fan, I
Mhm.
felt a little defensive of the
Of
show,
course.
and,
Yeah,
but obviously, like, you have to put away childish things like that, and you have to listen because, of course, they know more about it than I do,
yeah,
and it is important that we have the right kind of, representation and are telling the right stories. And it
absolutely.
doesn't mean that it's necessarily bad what they did make,
No,
because I love it.
it's a great show,
Um
and it also doesn't
Mhm.
mean that what Gene and what Seymour are saying is 100% accurate because
Mhm.
their own perspective and their own emotions into it. But what it does mean is that the thing that they are expressing to you is true for them, and
Yeah,
to be able to validate that, we
yeah,
be able to show up for them and to identify that they felt wronged by a process. And when we zoom out and we look at the component pieces of the process, we can we can think critically about it and say, yeah, that must have been challenging to tell a Korean Canadian story and have it be told by a room full of writers that you didn't feel represented your people.
yeah,
That's just math. you
right.
know?
It's true. And yeah, I mean, as an example, they're having a trilogy of movies coming out this year called The Wedding Veil
Oh, cool.
trilogy, and the entire cast, everybody is white,
Right.
cis, like, I
Yeah.
mean, the
Yeah.
whole,
Well, that's
and they're
unfortunate.
great. I mean, I love Lacey, I love Allison Sweeney, I love Autumn
Sure.
Reeser. They're all
Yeah, they're all
wonderful.
wonderful. And this is the thing, like, and this will forever be a challenging argument, but like the the people who have come to prominence within the Hallmark world are some of the most delightful people around.
Right.
Like, I don't know Autumn, but I did just work with Fiona, and Fiona and Autumn went to school together, and
Mhm.
vouches for Autumn. Like, there's no one nicer on this planet than Fiona.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So when you look at
Mhm.
right, they are wonderful and they are excited by this world, and but I also want those people to be agents of change just as much as anybody else because
Yeah.
they are a part of this conversation. They are progressive thinkers. They are all of these things, you know. And so it's not an indictment of anybody who is working, and it's not an indictment
Mhm.
of anybody who is a fan favorite, but it's more to say, in the position
Yeah.
that you're in now, what would it look like for you to create space for somebody in
Yeah, you kind of have to
the
look
table?
on a macro level versus a micro level, that you're looking at
Mhm.
the broader, not that you can't also look at individual films, but
Yeah.
I know you have to look at sort of the broader landscape of what is
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
Um,
And from a business point of view, and I mean this, I mean this like
mhm,
with every fiber of my business brain being, if you get those people to begin to create more space for people who don't look like them, the
mhm,
films that Hallmark can make every year will double.
right. It's true.
Factually, it will double. They will run
Mhm.
the ability to create as much work as because they're opening up so many communities. They're going to create
It's
appetite
true.
for interest, and I think to some extent they'll be able to do that without losing too much of their current fan base.
Mhm.
Because
It's true. I mean,
you
look
know the
what
movies, they're
Tyler
not going anywhere.
Perry's doing in
Yeah,
Atlanta. I mean, it just
exactly.
so much work.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's very true.
So, and it'll get there. And like I just came off of a project, which I don't know what it's going to be called now, but it was originally
Mhm.
with Fiona Gubelman, and so we are an interracial couple
Mm.
as the lead couple, and
Mhm.
and and I can I'll just separate this into sort of like component parts. Like Hallmark greenlit this movie,
Mhm.
but it's a production company in Vancouver that's putting the movie together called Two for the Money. And
Mhm.
when we start to look at, over the past year, I've really started to look at kind of what all the pieces are that are, let's say, problematic. The
Mhm.
pieces that create obstacles. And originally, I would have said, well, Hallmark has all the power, and so they must be a big component of that. And they are. Hallmark has the power to tell a production company how to behave, to let them know that they wouldn't buy something unless it is representative of XYZ. Okay, so that's their bag. But on the other side, you still have a production company who is financially dedicated to getting a movie made, right? They have to do it, and producing is a lot of budgeting, so they have to figure out how to do it. And in doing that, they have to decide what their production looks like. Are they equitable? Are they diverse? Are they et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Now, we just shot with Two for the Money, and I will say from top to bottom, this was the most connected cast crew experience that I've gotten to be a part of, who were all having a conversation that felt to me very new school. There was kindness on set that you can't teach. There was a camaraderie. There was
Mhm.
diversity across the crew that was visible, right? That
Mhm.
just and it wasn't spoken about. It didn't need to be spoken about. It just existed. There was this past or 2 weeks ago in Canada. I'm not sure how much of this showed up in the States, but there was a mass grave found under what's called a residential school. A residential school
Yeah,
that was
I
put
heard
in place
about
by the
that.
Canadian government. 215 Native kids, bodies, I should say, were found. And it's really opened up a large conversation, which is long overdue, about the residential school system. Well,
Mhm.
this crew went to catering and went to costumes and said, please find us orange fabric. Orange is the color that is associated with Every Child Matters, which is part of the movement around Indigenous Canadians that goes back to I think 2015 or 2014. So it's not new. And
Mhm.
the crew cut strips and they all tied on different bandanas wherever they wanted to, and just went about their day. And it was a way of showing solidarity and speaking to each other about their values while they were working. It was the most beautiful and incredible thing that I walked onto set and I was instantly like teared up. I was like,
Aw.
this
Yeah.
is so profound. And that's what it can look like. This is what a set can look like. This is what leadership can look like. Um, and so the production companies are just as responsible as Hallmark.
Mhm.
is,
Yeah.
is sort of what I'm getting at by
Well,
sharing that,
and
and Two for the Money certainly understands that, and they're making that known.
yeah, and I said this last year that I felt like some people were not too hard on Hallmark, but that they didn't seem to understand that this is more than this is a problem that
Yeah,
the Hallmark's maybe a little behind, the rest of Hollywood, but not that much. I mean, it's pretty much
no, so many
the
are in
same.
the same boat.
Yeah,
Yeah,
unless you're working in with somebody like Tyler Perry or something like that,
David
like
Duvernay, yeah.
it's not that, I mean, it's not that far behind when you're talking the whole system as a whole, not just Hallmark.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's good to see change, like you're saying, in the production companies, not even just
Yeah,
in Hallmark, and having these discussions about like Kim's Convenience and other things like that. And it was nice to see last Christmas, like some attempts that I think they did the best they could given
sure.
all
Yeah,
everything. And so that's why it was just kind of surprising to me to see this year maybe not as much as I was expecting, kind of going forward. So I'm curious to see what will happen in this upcoming holiday season, and hopefully we'll
yeah.
continue to
Well, we're
see
going to
that.
see an ebb and flow, and we're going to find out why things happened. I mean, I know that Michelle Vickery is no longer in her position,
Yeah.
and I don't know why. I don't know what that is about, but it certainly signals change in some capacity.
Yep.
And
Yep.
and far be it from me to speculate whether it's positive or negative, or
Right.
I have zero information around that, but I do think that it is significant in the same way that Wanya Lucas being appointed was significant. Rather, we don't know what the significance is, but I still stand by this, and I'm happy to say Hallmark did the best they could. I'm also just as happy to say the 6 months that followed had
Yeah.
had nothing, and
Right.
and you don't get a cookie for one without getting a demerit point for the other,
Right. Yeah. There
because
was
that's not progress.
Yeah.
And so there may be something in the works coming up, and certainly we just got to shoot something that that is going to show up on camera. There's an interfaith wedding in it. There are so many beautiful points to it. Are we?
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
Are we going to be one of 60?
there's a few little things like they had right in front of me that was a Filipino cast.
Yep.
They had the playing Cupid that had Mexican a Mexican American lead.
Yeah.
They had the final One Winter movie, which has Rukia
Kia.
in
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah.
they have some things. It's not like they
Yeah.
haven't done
It's
anything,
not
but
zero. It's
yeah,
not zero.
but it could have been
And I'm
better.
certainly not implying that it's zero by any stretch. Like I, I I think
But
all
yeah,
I'm offering is that if we're still just looking at casting and
right.
say, look how good we did, I don't think that that's enough.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Having to have gotten to be a part of something like Two for the Money, I can say, well, it's really valuable that there are production companies that are willing to put
Yeah,
themselves at the forefront as leaders, but the company that's going to get the nod for how impressive that was is Hallmark. And
right,
it
right,
wasn't it wasn't Hallmark's doing. It was
right.
producer Kim. And so I look at something like that and I say, "Hey, Hallmark, you have this production company that understands what leadership looks like. What would it mean for you two to be in conversation and to actually start to codify that so that you can signal to other production companies what you expect on a set?"
Yeah,
That's really
yeah,
valuable. That's,
very true.
like that's the beginning of change. Um,
Mhm.
and I
When you
know
start
that
writing
Hallmark
different
is,
stories too,
yeah,
and green
like
lighting different scripts and all that,
completely.
yeah.
I listened
Yeah.
to the podcast that Doria and Lisa did where they were talking about books and movies and
Mhm.
better or whatever. And then I messaged Doria about it because I was like, I don't. This isn't my world. This isn't. I don't read the same type of books necessarily.
Yeah,
Did have a question. I was like, so there are a ton of Black authors that are writing Black characters that are writing diverse worlds that aren't getting produced, and this is the pool that we're pulling from. Well, show me the pool. Like, show me the books that you know of, because I'm very curious to know why creating shows and why others aren't.
right.
Maybe some of them are bestsellers and the other ones are not. Well, at a glance, that's not the truth. That's not the case. So
Yeah.
policy behind it. Well, like how
Mhm.
do people choose things?
Yeah.
And
Well,
there are a lot of questions that it's not about an answer.
yeah.
It's about asking the right. It's about asking questions and sitting in the 8-second uh, discomfort of it. That's
Yeah.
one is 8 seconds to ask a difficult question, but asking a difficult question, sitting in the 8 seconds of discomfort before we can actually rumble with it.
Yep. I agree. Well, I wanted to ask you about Christmas in Evergreen.
Mhm.
Uh, and that was obviously very exciting. Congratulations, you got
Thank
your
you.
you got the lead role,
Yeah.
and of course, we love you and Rakia. And overall, I enjoyed the film. The one thing that I didn't care for, I did not like the fact that you two broke up and then you did get to back together, but
Yeah.
I know it just didn't feel like valid for your characters after all of the everything that you had gone through
Yeah.
to be together and then all of a sudden to just break up. I felt like that wouldn't you'd fight harder. And
Yeah.
I don't know, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I was pretty mixed on it as well. I mean, I know the two writers, although I don't really know why scripts become what they are. And I'm starting to get a little bit better insight into that when it comes to
Mhm.
script notes and development and um, just how information passes from executive to writer and writer back to executive and whatnot. That script had a lot of things that they were juggling. The biggest being the pandemic, actually. Uh,
Right.
I, and again, I don't know what the impact of the pandemic was on the script, but I mean, we didn't have a wedding at the end of it, so
Yeah.
that tells
Yeah,
you
that was
something.
obviously the biggest
Yeah, it was a
thing.
real left turn, and I don't think that. Who knows? I truly don't know. I'm speculating just like any other kind of fan would, but
Mhm.
if that was the intent. I don't think the intent was to say, "Hey, we're gonna have a wedding." Psych, we're not really. I think that was a pivot. That was something that
Yeah.
they had to figure out what to do with, and they wanted to keep it as close to a structure as possible, perhaps.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to our relationship, I understand what they were attempting to do, which is to create a big enough conflict that gives you that sort of swell of emotion at the end. But I had the same feeling. I actually thought it ended up being a miscommunication between two people that went on for far too long.
Right.
I think that I don't know, sitting at the center of that of Elliot and Hannah, I feel like they would have taken better care of each other, and that there might
Yeah.
be a different conflict that would have been heavier to deal with, but more honest. That said, I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Yeah.
For us, it was certainly fun to play. I will say, like, the breakup scene that we got to do in the train station, for me, like, getting to work that with Rakia was
Yeah.
amazing. So even if it felt unmotivated from a script point of view at times, um, as actors getting to do a breakup scene in the middle of a Hallmark, I mean, I
Yeah.
haven't gotten to do that. It was like a big one. It was emotional. It was raw.
Yeah.
So
Well, and you guys have such great chemistry
yeah,
that
we love each other.
yeah. Mhm. It was still good, and I loved the twins in the movie. They were
Oh my
so
goodness,
fun. They
they're a
were
riot.
great. Yeah.
I don't think anyone can really wrap their head around how they are in real life, but wow, they're amazing. They're so much fun to be around.
Yeah, and it came around in the end and everything, so I was fine with it in the end, and it's a weird thing because I feel like a lot of times with Hallmark, when they go to do a sequel, they kind
Uh-huh.
of don't know what to do because the couple
Yeah.
has met, they're in love. What do we do
Now
next?
what? Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough to
I
do, and
agree. I wonder if so. You just said earlier that Hallmark has kind of committed to this trilogy, the Wedding Veil trilogy.
yeah.
Guess I wonder, like, if something is pitched as a trilogy, it means that somebody has already thought through what the three major sort of stories are, whereas a lot of these, like whatever it's called, Wedding March '85,
Yeah, right.
and all the Christmas and Evergreens, I kind of look at them and I'm like, are you just making them because people like them? Well, if you are, then how do you determine what the story is? And I feel like those are the ones where the story kind of meanders a little bit, whereas, and we'll see, but something like Wedding Veil, where it's a locked trilogy, or it's a
Uh-huh.
ordained trilogy,
Right.
we're going to see is something like conflict that spans 3 movies that are all standalone movies. So I don't know. I guess
It's gonna be interesting to see.
like they want to do it. They want to do a sequel because it did well, not because there's more story to tell.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think maybe sometimes they they think that, and maybe they overthink the need for conflict. Like, yes, you need conflict in a story, but
Hmm.
it could be pretty simple, like
Yeah,
not knowing where to propose, or you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be like this huge conflict. Like, it
yeah,
could be like a
I
small
completely agree.
conflict.
Like even the one that we just did, there's I won't give anything away here, but
Uh,
there is a conflict in it, and the conflict is relevant and real. And as soon as Fiona and I read it, we were like, "Oh, this is such a really like beautiful structure to have a sequel and to have a third." And I don't not
mhm.
it's happening. Maybe if enough people
Right.
like it, they'll commission it. But more to say that structurally there is space for a second conflict, or there
Mhm.
is for an extension of the story, and that the extension of the story actually doesn't need to be conflict oriented. It can be like growing in love oriented.
Right.
Because when you are growing in love, there is inherently conflict. Like things are going to be difficult, things are going to go wrong, but also so much can go right. And
Mhm.
I
That's
just
true.
think, yeah.
Well, before you go, I wanted to just ask about the Mighty Ducks.
Oh my gosh,
The
yeah,
Yeah, that you got to be a part of Mighty Ducks Game Changers.
yeah.
What was that like?
Mighty Ducks was very cool. Again, sort of like dividing the experiences. We were shooting right in the middle of the pandemic when everything came back on, so that proved difficult.
Mhm.
Um, and it's really impressive what they were able to put together and how they were able to put together everything, considering kind of like what was happening in the world around. That said, what an amazing thing to be a part of. I mean, obviously, I'm the right age to have grown up with Coach Bombay when he was Coach Bombay,
Mhm.
and I loved the Ducks when I was a kid, and I played soccer, not hockey, but it didn't matter. It was so transferable that as a young athlete, especially being an underdog, you really felt seen and you felt like there was space for you. And so it was fun. I got to play a dad, which is great.
Mhm.
And that was a lot of that's just like an exciting thing to know that those are roles that I get to play kind of moving forward, especially because I'm a dad in real life. And so even though they're much younger, there's a lot of information in that. But the story of the Mighty Ducks for me were the kids. Like like
Right.
if people watched that and didn't fall in love with Sway Batia and with Maxwell Simpkins and Luke Islam and Brady Noon, like and DJ Watts, like there's so like Bella and Tegan, like the kids on it were so great, and so some of them are so funny, some of them are so like touching and heartfelt. Like I don't know if anybody watched America's Got Talent prior to Mighty Ducks and knew Luke Islam, but if they didn't, like that kid has the voice of an angel.
Mhm.
It is wild, and so getting to be around them while they were on this journey, and for them, this is just work and this is just a job.
Yeah.
It's life, they're not jaded. They're not like at the end of some career. They're just kids. They're kids who recognize that they have this beautiful opportunity to do something that's so much fun. And they became like really close friends and with each other, and then obviously with us as the parents. It was really nice. It was really a
Yeah.
kind experience. And Michael Spiller, who directed many episodes, including that amazing finale, was again like he's what you want from a leader. He's also one of the executives. He's what you want from a leader, right? He is kind and caring and considerate, and he listens to people, and he doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't yell. Like I don't think I saw him angry once. And so to have somebody like that, it really sets the tone and clarifies the culture that you're a part of.
Yeah, Disney is just incredible with their teen and child casting. They always nail it.
Yeah,
You think of like High School Musical. They've had, I mean, finding people like Demi Lovato and Miley Cyrus, and I mean, the list goes on
right.
and
Yeah,
on.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They
So,
they they have something in their water that's different than everyone else's.
mhm. That's great. Well, congratulations on that,
Thank you.
and we'll be excited about the new movie. Do you know, is it what season it's in?
I don't actually. I think it's some.
Okay.
I'm assuming it's coming out in the next, I don't know, month or so.
Okay.
Mm,
Okay, good. Cool. Well, we'll look
yeah.
forward to it and,
Having been
see.
in it, I have very little information about that sort of thing.
Right.
Don't
Okay.
ask the right questions.
Well, sometimes you can tell
Uh,
from the decor and
yeah.
whatever,
Yeah,
but
no, no. We were like walking around rose gardens and a pond. Like it wasn't. It's definitely
okay.
it's not winter, so that's kind of why I was like, I think it's summer. I feel
Okay.
like spring has passed, so it must be right in the center of summer. I think it's
Okay.
going to be on Hallmark mysteries, even though
Oh,
it's not
okay.
a mystery, but I think it's on the second Hallmark channel. I think.
Okay,
What do
cool.
I know?
Well, we'll be excited when we hear more about it.
Yeah,
And
totally.
thank you so much for doing this. I really
Oh, thank
appreciate
you.
this. It was a great discussion. We should do it again. Maybe not wait 6 months. Maybe we'll do it again soon.
I would love that. Yeah,
Yeah, because it's
that'd
always
be
great to
great.
talk with you. And congratulations on your new little one and your
Thank you
new
so much.
restaurant and just so much great going on in your life. That's really amazing.
Yeah, yeah, we have a lot of really fun things happening. So
Yeah.
I'm quite grateful, and more than anything, I mean, amongst all those things and getting to do new movies, I'm always the most excited about getting to meet new people. So getting to work with Jessica Harmon
Hmm.
and Zibby, who is Zibby Allen's on the new season of Virgin River that's coming up. Like it was just so amazing to be around people who are so passionate and so connected and so kind. Uh,
Yeah.
so in addition to all the cool things I have going on, I also just got like a whole keychain of new friends, which
Yeah.
is pretty enriching.
That's great. What's your social media if people want to follow you, continue this conversation?
I'm always on my Instagram, which is just my first and last name, so at Antonio Cayonne. And then sometimes when I'm fired up, I show up on Twitter. It's just my last name, so it's at Cayonne,
Okay, great.
Cayonne.
Great. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all over social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. Check that out. Also, make sure you're following the podcast at Hallmarkies Pod and Hallmarkies Podcast. And if you are listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews. We really appreciate that. And if you are listening on YouTube, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Appreciate that so much. We also have our Patreon group, which is really fun, and our merch store. Take a look at that. All that information in the description. Thank you so much, Antonio. This was great. And yeah, we'll talk again soon.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay.